Welcome to the Texas Talks podcast. I'm your host, Brad Swail. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming to the show Senator Paul Bettencourt. First elected to the Senate in 2014, Paul Bettencourt represents Senate District 7, which encompasses most of West Harris County. He previously served 10 years from 1998 to 2008 as the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector. Senator Paul Bettencourt, welcome back to the show. You're our first returning guest.
Oh, well, it's great. I was just thinking, I was a tax assessor for a tax cut before it was cool, Brad. That's the only reason I got elected, okay?
Thank you. I really appreciate it's the first time having Donald Trump on the show as well.
Well, that's true. And it may not be the last. He may show up in about 5 minutes, but we'll find out.
That's great. So I want to talk to you about this session, but before we begin, and some of the legislation that you're working on, you've been a senator since 2014. I'm curious if you could maybe just briefly describe, how have things changed, if at all, as, that's more than 10 years now, more than a decade of experience?
Well, the Senate 10 years ago was not considered the conservative bastion that it is now.
Okay.
And that's because there was a large influx of senators and, of course, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick at the same time. When that happened, that started shifting the Senate to what we now see as probably the most conservative Senate, certainly that I'm aware of anywhere in the United States. But more importantly, it's probably the most effective too. When you look at all the issues that we've tackled, whether it be my record $22.7 billion tax cut last session, which is a record. And we look at the ESA accounts this year, SB2, that was $1 billion. That's the largest start to an educational savings account in the country.
Yeah.
So when Senator Creighton or I or any of my classmates, Lois Colcourse, Charles Perry's talking about water, Bob Hall's trying to kill off the lottery. When all of us take on an issue, it's a big change to Texas status quo, but how Texas goes literally is how the nation goes.
Okay. So I'm glad you brought up SB2. I wanted to talk to you about that. Obviously, that's a banner legislation for this session. I'm curious what your thoughts on it. I know that the left and Democrats have certainly opposition to it. A lot of conservatives, maybe not elected representatives, a lot of conservatives say that doesn't go far enough. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, first off, it is a record ESA of the entire country. Now, one of the advantages of being late to the party, because we're the largest state in the union that doesn't have educational savings account, and certainly the largest red state. We had a chance to look at all the best practices. See, last decade, I was carrying earlier versions of this called tax credit scholarships, and we could get them out of the Senate, but we couldn't even get them heard in the House. So Lieutenant Governor Patrick made that a priority. Again, 3 years ago, he appointed Brandon Creighton to the chair of the Education Committee, and I'm the longest serving member on that committee as a Republican, Royce West as the Democrat. And put together a really good package based on all the best practices out there. What worked in Florida, what works in Utah, what works in pick the state, Georgia, whatever. We put it all together, and it takes time to get that done. But it was great to see the results. But the real blockbuster that occurred in this was the governor, because the governor really literally blasted out 15 out of 17 Republican state reps that were against school choice. And I mean blasted with literally, neutron weapons, millions of dollars, won 15 out of 17 races. And that changed the entire culture of the House on ESAs. Now, here's the results. We're going to have 100,000 kids. They're going to have a choice. And this is going to be, a lot of these kids are special needs. A lot of them are, let's say middle income, low income. Brad, everybody knows in Austin that, it's great. If you have a 2-income family making $160,000, you should be just living a great life. But it's tough because of the expenses in this town. They'll all qualify for an educational savings account, and for the special needs kids, which has been a passion of mine. We're actually passing another bill, which is not on our list, but it's already in the House. and it improves special education. And we're going to get away from what the old school way to treat it was, not to ignore it. This one, we're going to start with evaluations and then intensity models of what it takes to get these kids help and early intervention. So I look at all this, and it's a wonderful transformation. And on the floor of the Senate, we were having a debate that morning, and the Democrats really were piling on. This is the end of public education, even though it's only 100,000 students out of over 5 million. This is going to be totally misused, even though we've got all the fraud controls you can imagine in there from watching all this. And so I called it a joyous day, because that's what it is. It's a joyous day, because think of all the education. If you're in a failing school like Kingsville ISD, every school's an F, okay? Every school's an F.
That's not good.
Okay? And the district's an F. Well, wait, there might be one school's a D. But anyway, one guy got an almost passing grade. And so why not let them out? Find a school district, find a private school, get somewhere where there's an education. And I saw that in Houston when Cashmere and Wheatley high schools were on the improvements required list, meant they're supposed to be closed for 10 years.
Yep.
And they didn't do anything. So 10 years and years of people going through Cashmere, actually, for 10 years, they didn't even have a certified math teacher.
Whoa.
Yeah. So this is big work, but we're also going to be plowing in a bunch of money into public education. We'll talk about that some more.
Yeah, for sure. And as a father of a special needs child, all your work towards special needs students and, having the choices, this is not my platform to tell my life story, but just for the record, my public school is actually doing a great job with my special needs child. So I wouldn't even take advantage of it.
Well, and the great news is that your public school, because of SB 569, right, Mark? Okay. We've passed that. And so special needs kids get evaluations, they get modeling done, they get intensity-based model on what it costs. And the great news is we put in $699 million into the public school system just for special needs. And the good news is what I'm hearing from the House conferees and the Senate conferees, that money's going up.
Yeah.
So we're not only putting money into special needs kids, we're doing teacher incentive allotment, AKA pay raises. We're putting money into doubling the school safety allotment. We're really putting a lot of money into public schools too. So we're not leaving them behind just because we have an ESA that has 1.7% of the kids if everybody goes and does it.
Yeah.
So that's part of the misinformation and what are basically leftist progressive propaganda against school choice.
So you mentioned property taxes before, and property taxes is something that people, constituents, especially conservative constituents, I would imagine on both sides of the aisle, people struggle to pay their property taxes because they keep going up all the time. I know that the state of Texas doesn't collect property taxes. It's more of a sales tax and, mineral rights. That
right,
sort of
and we
thing.
don't have a statewide property tax.
Right.
But there's some things we can do to help.
Right. So you have SB 23, which I think increases the homestead exemption from $10,000 to $60,000 for adults who are disabled, and for elderly, 65 or older. Is that elderly? Should I say elderly?
You could say seniors.
Seniors.
Brad, the seniors, we need some help here, So I put in a little extra that, I've got a great friend, Lieutenant Governor Patrick. He's really a great guy, and he knows that homesteads are the exemptions are the way to go. So anyway, here's what we're doing. We put in a blockbuster record last time, $22 billion. We're putting in $10 billion this time. And remember, every time we put something in, we have to pay for it.
Yeah.
So we actually started paying $51 billion out of our budget. The single largest item in the entire state of Texas budget is buying down property taxes on schools for taxpayers, because we don't want the schools to have to come out of pocket. And if you're given a tax cut, you better buy it down, and you better be able to get that cut to the people that own the home and the businesses and all the taxpayers. So we're raising the homestead exemption by 40%. That means we go from 100 to 140. That saves everybody, plus the buy down of the rates, about $500. But wait, there's more. If you're over 65, like the seniors in the audience, those great people, they love me. They vote for me. They really love me. Anyway, they'll get an average of $950 off. And again, this is for your lifetime. So Brad, as long as you own a home, you get that $500. Okay. For long as you own the home, you get this $950. But even more importantly, what you said about people being squeezed on budgets is so important. We've got a ton of bills about housing affordability. This is not affordable housing.
Yep.
We're not building federal projects. We're trying to make housing affordable. And the first place you do is by making homestead exemptions on school taxes. And for over 65s, because of the way these things work, and I don't want to get into a complicated explanation, but we passed all these bills over the last 3 years. Instead of the homestead exemption just making things frozen for school taxes, it actually goes down. And 43% of all Texas seniors don't pay a property tax right now. We pass all this stuff in November. It's going to shoot over into a super majority, like close to 2/3. They won't pay a property tax for schools. Now, this is really important. A lot of people say, well, I don't have kids in school. Why do I have to pay?
Yeah.
But the key thing is over 65s have only $36,000 a year disposable income, tax-free. So you hand it back $1,000. That's really real news.
Yeah.
And in rural Texas, it drops to $30,000. And if they don't pay a school ISD tax, that's huge.
I love it. I'm glad that he keeps coming back. That's really fun.
He keeps showing up unexpectedly. I don't know. Maybe I need Sergeant Schultz. I know nothing.
I know you'll get into Star Trek eventually, but we got also. I want to talk to you about SB 2519, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I am. I know that you will. It stops municipalities, counties, other governmental agencies or organizations from using M&O, maintenance and operation taxes on bonds and debt. And if large projects materially deviate, then there's a mechanism for citizens to I don't know, there's recourse.
Right. Well, this started, you had Ellen Troxclair on, okay?
With her, yeah.
Yeah. Now, what happened is you don't want to cross the streams. This is a Ghostbusters analogy.
Sure.
Okay.
You got them all. You got all the analogies.
Yeah, all the analogies. All right. You've got maintenance and operation tax rate, and you got interest and savings. Okay. Debt and operating money. Well, what happened is in Project Connect and also up in Amarillo, there's been other places, they've just crossed the streams on purpose. So they went to the voters and said, okay, let me raise your M&O taxes and then shuffle the money to a third party so they could do bonded indebtedness. Now, the problem with that is not truth in taxation. It's not the right way to play it. You should go to the public and say, okay, if I want to do Project Connect, it's going to cost X number of billions of dollars, because digging in the dirt is the most expensive thing government can do.
Yeah.
The Boston Big Dig being one of the classic examples.
Sure.
For a few miles, it cost them $25 billion. Now, right. I mean,
sounds reasonable.
Well, that's a lot of money, even by my standards, Brad. That's a big boy. Okay. Now, when that happened, there was they were uproar because it raised everybody's taxes by 20% of the city. Well, the money wasn't going into the city; it was being sent to a third party. So we had some bills last time, and I asked the AG. I said, "Can you cross the streams?" And the AG said, "No, you shouldn't do it." Now, liberals' heads blew off, and I guess City Hall in Austin's heads exploded. And I keep telling them, take it back to the public. Tell them the real cost of Project Connect. Ask for their vote. And I get nothing but, well, we can't do that. And because they know that, if you want to ratify what's already occurred, you're going to have to say, digging in the dirt in this town in Austin. Can you imagine how much it costs to run a subway from just here to UT? It's enormously expensive. So, but if the public votes themselves a tax increase, who am I to argue with it? Because all the legislation I've done, whether it's Senate Bill 2 from 2019, all this work I've done, if the public votes themselves a tax increase, then that's it.
Yeah.
Because that's why the public now gets involved in taxes. It's a way to lower taxes for cities and counties. And we've had some bad actors lately, so we're busting them. And they're not just blue counties like Harris. It's like the biggest suburban county, Montgomery County. Everybody finds out, where the holes in the system are, and Uncle Paul has to get the plumbers out, and we have to fix it. So we've got those bills moving through. We don't want city and county taxes raising 15% in 1 year. That's what Lena Hidalgo did in Harris County.
Yeah.
She did Rahm Emanuel, no let any crisis go to waste.
Yeah.
The Category 1 hurricane, minimal loss of everything, huge gain for the county because they in 1 year raised their taxes 15%, almost $400 million.
So on the using the maintenance and operation to transfer to a government corporation, what is it called? Can't remember off the top of my head, but transferring it to another entity to become indebted, do the bonds, stuff like that. Why is it important to stop the M&O taxes from being used on bond debt?
Because that money, the M&O, should have been used for, what's wrong with this town? Police, fire, a few minor things. The crime rate especially on theft is off the charts. And maintenance and operations money is supposed to go into the city's general fund. And 2/3 of the general fund in every city roughly is police and fire. So when you take that money and you shovel it off, you're basically starving your own operations. Then the other point is that you can't bond it because we have all these bond covenants based around interest and sinking funds, and they go forward. And all they can do now is take that excess money and take that year and put it in the piggy bank over in the governmental corporation that they've used.
Yeah.
And so they can't bond anything. And that's why the AG intervened.
So I know you're a little bit short on time, but I wanted to ask you about SB 1025, which I think has to do with how things are labeled or how things are written on ballots. I think it was a couple sessions ago that it was passed that they had to, in bold letters, put, on a bond or whatever, this is a tax increase. Bold letters.
Sure, and because it is.
Correct. And and they wanted people to know that this is a tax increase so that there wasn't any, funny business. And I think what happened was government organizations got around it by putting everything in bold letters. Right.
There's so many scams that go on, and I have spent so much time chasing local governments. We had the city of San Marcos basically say, look, the state of Texas stops at the city line and your regulations don't apply here. College Station, was just chasing after students with, cameras and police forces because they might have a family relationship in a home, and they may exceed the limit of 5. I mean, you won't even believe all this crazy stuff. So in this case, we're going to say what's a tax increase is a tax increase. We did it for schools. The first year we did it for schools, only 48% of bonds passed because people now realize, because the old dodge was, Brad, I'm not raising your taxes because I'm not raising the rate, but your value's going up. And so they're lying to you, okay? It's like Lena Hidalgo down in Harris County. That's not a 15% increase. It's only an 8%. Yeah. And the media, because she's a leftist progressive, she has to be right. The people that actually do the numbers, the CPAs, are wrong. So we put that label in that bill on cities and counties. Now, supposedly the end of the world is going to commence and it's going to be an apocalypse, okay? But we roared it out of the Senate, bipartisan.
Yeah.
And it should pass the House too, because nothing's free on a bond. You either have to pay for it with debt, or people will use short-term instruments like commercial paper, but it's not free.
Yep.
And we've had a culture of, I'm not raising your taxes because I don't raise the rate. But that's what all this is designed to do. And it's really made a big difference. Now the cities and the counties are going to have to do what the school districts do. They're going to have to start, here's why we want it, and here's what it does for you. And it's going to be a line item instead of all in some giant, one big bond. and you're going to be able to select what you want.
Yeah.
And look, we just have to get back to the fundamentals. It's your money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the whole thing is. It's gone topsy-turvy. You know, as a tax assessor, I literally was for a tax cut. Okay. I mean, my commissioner's court got super mad at me when I started talking about cutting taxes. But then one guy, Steve Raddick, you know, many years later, kept asking me, Paul, how much money did I save when I actually cut taxes that last time? And he was proud of it.
Yeah.
Because at some point in time, you realize that it's not your money, it's somebody else's money. And when you see your money being wasted on universal basic income, illegal alien defense, bike lanes that, literally bike lanes to nowhere. You just have to drive around Austin and say, there's two major obstacles that you have to overcome. All the little white cones, that are 5 feet tall because they're moving out into the street.
Yeah.
Or you have to avoid the new driverless cars, that are circling around each other.
Well, Senator Paul Bettencourt, I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to briefly mention? Maybe that you want people to live long, but you also want them to prosper?
I do. I always want you to live long and prosper. Okay, awesome. To all the cameras wherever you are, and that's why. Look, I don't do all this by myself. I got a real good company of heroes that I work with in the Texas Senate, and we all take the lead on certain things. And we've got Lieutenant Governor Patrick plowing the road on these issues. Dan and I go back to 20 years ago when we used to come up and be citizens testifying at hearings for tax relief. So we take this seriously. We're taking this housing affordability seriously. I hope some of these bills pass the House. Right now, I'm not sure any of them will. It would be a disappointment in the session if it does. But most everything else is roaring out of there. And because you know what's going to happen, Brad, in November, those tax bills are going to be out. They're going to be beautiful because they're going to be down. They're going to see that lovely tax cut, and everybody's going to go and they're going to vote yes on those propositions for homestead exemption. I think that senior tax is going to set a record, Brad. It's going to be the world's greatest, the greatest ever proposition. I think it's going to get 90% of the vote. I'm going to be so proud of that. And then I'll be calling that Bettencourt guy. He's a friend of Patrick's. I don't know. He may be as smart as Elon. I'm not sure. I think he's about as smart. That's what I heard.
Well, Senator Paul Bettencourt / Donald Trump, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. Enjoy it, Brad.
Thank you.